We finally made it to EICMA. We're here at the Insta360 booth. They are sponsoring today's video, and we're going to see all the different new motorcycles that have come out and also check out some of the cool new stuff that Insta360 has come out with. So let's get started. I am actually vlogging on the Ace Pro 2 right now. Seems like this camera has already sold out. Just a note before we get started, I won't be covering models that aren't available in the USA for 2025. There are a lot of bikes to get through. These are not the only launches, just the ones that you guys requested and also the ones that caught my eye. For BMW, the BMW M1000R and the S1000R, these two models are new for 2025 and caught my attention. They seem largely the same, but the S1000R is geared more for the street and makes 170 horsepower at 11,000 RPM and 84 foot-pounds of torque at 9,250 RPM, and it tops out at just over 120 miles an hour. The M1000, on the other hand, is geared more for track and makes 205 horsepower at 13,750 RPM and 83 foot-pounds of torque at 11,100 RPM, and it tops out at 170 miles an hour according to BMW. I do think the winglets on the M1000R look weird. Yeah, they look like an afterthought to me. I don't know, that's just my 2 cents. Otherwise, for the M1000R, the vibe is supposed to be sport bike meets a roadster, which is pretty spot on, I think. The 205 horsepower really seals the deal here. All right, KTM. The KTM 990 Duke R is new for 2025. They like to call it the Punisher because it's supposed to punish your rivals. Let's not get into that marketing idea. It looks great. It's very aggressive. Some people are not a fan of the front. For 2025, it's got an upgraded suspension and electronic functionality, stiffer forks and adjustable handlebars, and the levers for a more sporty setup. They call it a light middleweight naked bike, which I disagree with. This is not a middleweight bike. It's a 947cc engine, parallel twin, putting out 123 horsepower at 9,500 RPM and 76 foot-pounds of torque at 6,750 RPM. A middleweight naked is something like the MT-07, so other than marketing purposes, I'm not sure why they say this is a middleweight. It's either the fastest middleweight bike ever or a lower spec leader naked. So I guess fastest middleweight sounded better for marketing. For the USA market though, KTM did not have a lot of new things that I was interested in, so let's move on. All right, let's all take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Insta360. Without them, we wouldn't be able to see these cool new launches at EICMA. And they have their own interesting launch happening here as well. A new collaboration with BMW Motorrad was just announced. Now Insta360 has an X4 that is branded with the BMW logo and has some interesting new features specifically for BMW riders. And thanks to that collaboration, some of these features will trickle down to the regular X4 as well. I think the X4 is an insanely powerful 360 camera that's accessible and easy to use. Aside from being able to film an 8K resolution on the X4 and in 360 degrees, the BMW X4 collab features a BMW dashboard during riding, where it can sync with your phone or smartwatch to pull information such as GPS speed, elevation, incline, and even heart rate and calories burned. And it displays it as an overlay over your riding footage in a classic BMW style that mimics your motorcycle's display. Another cool new feature that is under development and will be released soon is the automatic license plate blurring feature that you can turn on in post-production in the app. You'll soon be able to blur out your own plate and your friend's plates and post the video without worries about privacy. And if you want to use the camera as a dash cam on your bike, you'll be able to do that too with the auto on feature. As soon as you turn your bike on, the camera turns on and starts recording. You can decide how much storage space is used on your SD card to capture dash cam footage, and when that limit is reached, the oldest footage gets overridden. The X4 BMW Motorrad collection is very cool, and I'm looking forward to some of these new features. I'll leave a link in the description to the collab if you're interested in checking it out. Now let's get back to the bikes. CFMOTO, on the other hand, is launching 2025 models left and right, starting with the 675 SRR, or the 675 SS as it will be called on the US market. It's pretty clear that this is meant to be an R7 and a Daytona 660 competitor, and styling wise I think this is the best looking of the three. The engine is 3-cylinder inline 4. It does 95 horsepower at 11,000 RPM and has 51.6 foot-pounds of torque at 8,250 RPM. And comparison-wise, it's actually less similar than the R7, CBR 650R, and Ninja 650, and it's closer to the likes of the Daytona 660, Aprilia 660, and Ninja ZX6R. You also have a quick shifter on upshifts only, 2 levels of traction control, and there is an adjustable front and rear suspension. This is a solid bike, price-wise, it's cheaper than its competitors in this category at only $8,000. Next up, the 800NK I was excited for. New for 2025, the colors, I have to be honest, are not super exciting, at least the options in the US from what I've seen. We don't get this nice blue option with the colored wheels in the US, so we only get the black and white so far. The design of the front I do really like. Spec-wise, we have a 2-cylinder inline, 100 horsepower at 9,000 RPM, and 59.7 foot-pounds of torque at 8,000 RPM. One close comparison I can make is to the 2024 KTM 790, which makes 64.2 foot-pounds of torque at 8,000 RPM and 105 horsepower at 8,500 RPM. All right, so Yamaha, I was so excited to see the new 2025 MT-07. I currently ride a 2019 MT-07 and I love it. The redesign is awesome and I definitely think it's a step in the right direction. I think the 2021 model was hideous when it came out. It looked cheap and unfinished in a bad way. The new front looks way better. I'm glad they did away with that weird alien looking middle bulb, although it is still there, just way less noticeable. They also have a nice new seat design with gorgeous stitching. The new 2025 MT-07 makes 72.4 horsepower at 8,750 RPM and 49.4 foot-pounds of torque at 6,500 RPM. Some big new features include the Yamaha ride control that allows the rider to choose between 3 modes, including Sport, Street, or Custom. And the system also provides switchable traction control that can be customized. There's a new TFT display, self-canceling turn signals. Excellent Yamaha, you did good. I actually want this new model. All right, I'm gonna stop drooling now and let's move on. Next up, the MT-09 SP version, which is the suspension package option. In the front, you get inverted forks, adjustable preload, compression, and rebound. Rear suspension is Olin single shock with adjustable preload, compression, and rebound. On the normal MT-09, you just don't get the Olin shock or the compression adjustment option in the back. The engine is an inline 3-cylinder and it's unchanged from 2024, so you'll get the same 68.6 foot-pounds of torque at 7,000 RPM and 117 horsepower at 10,000 RPM. Styling-wise, I think it looks great, very futuristic looking, the lines look clean. It's slightly similar to the MT-07 as well, and well, you already know my thoughts on that. Of course, we can't leave Yamaha without talking about the R9. People either love it or hate it. I'm on the I don't care because I'm not interested in buying an R9. I like the nakeds better side of that argument, so here's an unbiased review. It's an inline 3-cylinder, which is why people hate it, because it's not an R6. It's the same engine as the MT-09, and since there was no new engine for the 2025 MT-09, this is probably the 2024 MT-09 engine as well. You get 68.6 foot-pounds of torque at 7,000 RPM and 117 horsepower at 10,000 RPM. You also get a fully adjustable suspension in the front and rear, which is nice. Styling-wise, I won't lie, it looks pretty unremarkable to me. It just looks too similar to the R7, but with some wiglets. That big square with the bulb looks unfinished to me. It honestly looked better in the promo photos than it does in real life. The Acro exhaust is a nice touch. I wish they had made it black though. The MT-09 is $10,800. The MT-09 SP is $12,500 and the R9 is $12,500. I would probably just get an MT-09. Moving on. I think Honda had the biggest display at EICMA this year. I mean, it was like walking into a club with music and flashing lights, and the first sexy guy that caught my eye was the CBR 500R. This bike is gorgeous. Honda doesn't seem to conform to those little slit-like LED strip headlights, and I can appreciate that as long as it's done right and it doesn't age the bike and make it look like it belongs in 2015 or something like that. The engine is a 471cc parallel twin. It makes 47 horsepower at 8,600 RPM and 31.7 foot-pounds of torque at 6,500 RPM. The suspension is not adjustable except for preload in the back. Overall, it seems like it has all the Fire Blade looks, but with everyday usability. You even get little winglets, which is funny, but nice. I like this guy. I definitely let him buy me a drink in this EICMA Honda Club. Oddly enough, no new CBR 650R on the Honda USA website. There was other bikes here that I was interested in, like the Hornet line and what looked like a naked version of the Hornet right next to it. I wasn't really sure as it wasn't labeled anywhere and I had never seen this model before, but I looked it up and it's the CB1000 Hornet. It looks really cool. I wish we had these too in the US. A few models were getting more attention at Ducati than others. The first is the V2, which could be described as a more accessible version of the V4, but for 2025 it has been redesigned completely from scratch. It's now the lightest Panigale of all time. It weighs 37 pounds less than the previous model at only 388 pounds dry weight. You get 120 horsepower at 10,750 RPM and 69 foot-pounds of torque at 8,250 RPM. The S version of the V2 is largely defined by the suspension components. On the standard bike, there are 43mm Marzocchi forks, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, that looks fully adjustable, and a Kayaba monoshock, also fully adjustable. The S model uses the Öhlins Nix 30 forks and a matching Öhlins shock. Again, fully adjustable. Looks-wise, I can't even say anything more. It's a Ducati, of course it's gorgeous. There's also the new V4 and V4S for 2025. The S is the adaptive suspension options. The V4 is the V2 on steroids. It's the closest bike to MotoGP specs that Ducati makes. From last year's model, it's lighter by 2.2 pounds. It has 216 horsepower at 13,500 RPM and 89 foot-pounds of torque at 11,250 RPM. But that is only the Euro 5 specs. For the US market, the V4 reportedly only has 209 horsepower at 12,750 RPM, but it gains 0.5 foot-pounds of torque, so question mark. Ducati doesn't really have an explanation for the disparity, but some speculate noise emissions specifically have forced manufacturers to send differently tuned models to the US. The Multistrada V4S was also getting a lot of attention from the boys mostly. I think I was the only girl filming this thing for miles. My biggest fear when I heard about this bike was that it would be like the Hyperstrada that I rode before. Thanks to Spike's Corner for letting me borrow it for a weekend. The Hyperstrada is no longer made and the Multistrada replaced it. It does seem like the 2025 Multistrada comes with a low seat plus low suspension accessory option that brings the seat height down from a max of 33.9 inches to 31.1 inches, and that's even lower than the stock R7, so I'm happy about that. It's a 1,158cc and you get 170 horsepower at 10,500 RPM and 92 foot-pounds of torque at 8,750 RPM. I could see myself getting a Multistrada for some more relaxed riding at some distant point in the future. Either urban or sport touring, I think this bike is suited for both. Alright, for Aprilia there is a 2025 model of the Aprilia RS 457. I guess this can compete with the Honda CBR 500R that I mentioned earlier. It's Aprilia's design and I'm a big fan. I like all of Aprilia's recent designs, so I have no complaints here. This 457 looks great too. It has a parallel twin engine that makes 47.6 horsepower at 9,400 RPM with 32.1 foot-pounds of torque at 6,700 RPM. So it's extremely close to the CBR 500R specs-wise. Adjustable preload only on the front and rear suspension. You also get 3 riding modes and adjustable traction control. From what I've seen online, you can take this bike to the track no problem, but just don't expect it to be very punchy. There's also a naked version, the Tuono 457, which looks great. Next up, a new 2025 V4 Tuono factory is updated, likely because of the Euro 5 regulations that are coming. This means a bigger engine from 1077cc to 1099cc. It's a 65-degree V4 that has 177.5 horsepower at 11,350 RPM and 89.3 foot-pounds of torque at 9,000 RPM. But it also gets a nice redesign. It now also comes with, you guessed it, winglets. I think this looks silly. It's supposed to be a naked bike after all, but I barely think it's a naked bike to begin with, so maybe this isn't so crazy. At this point, all that's missing from the Tuono to make it a sport bike is one piece of plastic on the bottom. Still, I'm a big fan of the Tuono range. At Suzuki, the GSX-8R is all the rage right now. They describe this bike as riding on the engineering advances of the GSX-8S. The agile GSX-8R is designed to satisfy whether riding around town or heading out for a sporty run through the winding mountain roads on the weekend. So it seems like it's trying to be a little bit of everything. The engine is a parallel twin 776cc that has 83 horsepower at 8,500 RPM and 57.5 foot-pounds of torque at 6,800 RPM. There's 3 riding modes and 4 traction control settings to pick from, and a bi-directional quick shifter. Very nice. I like the styling except for 2 things. The 2 front center headlights are not my cup of tea. I know it's definitely Suzuki's cup of tea, so I can't fault them for it, but it still looks eh. And then the stickers with the name GSX-8R on the bike looked super cheap and just sloppily added as an afterthought. I know they look good from far away, but as soon as I got up close, they looked really cheap and it bugged me enough that I knew I had to mention it, but that was really the only design flaw I could find. Okay, moving on. Over at the Triumph booth, one bike I heard some hype around was the new SpeedTwin 1200 RS. This is part of their Modern Classics collection, and it's geared for people that want performance from their classic naked bike. The 1200cc engine puts out 103.5 horsepower at 7,750 RPM and 83 foot-pounds of torque at 4,250 RPM. Triumph's marketing slogan for this is "Nothing comes close." It comes with an Öhlins rear shock, a quick shifter, and has cruise control. All great things. The critiques I've heard is that you get more horsepower than the previous generations, but you have to rev higher, and on the SpeedTwin 1200, you don't go near redline anyway. And people are torn from the change to a LCD dial for the dash from the twin analog dials that it used to have, and it's mounted off-center. The difference between the base and the RS model is the fully adjustable rear suspension, the upside-down forks, and the addition of the Öhlins name into the mix. I don't have too much experience with this modern classic type of bike, but actually I think it looks really good. All right, moving on to KOVE. This is a bonus shout out to a brand that is apparently available in the US, and they have dealers in many states it seems, but I've never heard of them. KOVE Motorcycles has a full range of bikes. I only quickly looked through their stock and somehow it felt like I was visiting all the different motorcycle manufacturers at once. Do you get that same feeling? I think a lot of their bikes look like models from other brands. No idea this brand existed, but now I do, and now you do too. A big thank you again to Insta360 for sponsoring this trip. Thank you all for joining. Hope you learned something, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!